Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our virtual panel, Engineering Excellence and the Product Mindset. My name is Rafa Halawi, and I'm the campaign manager at 3 Pillar Global. I wanted to go through some housekeeping items before we get started. All attendees are muted throughout the webinar, but we'd love to hear from you. This is an interactive session, so please type your questions in the question box on your control panel, and the presenters will be happy to answer them throughout the presentation. The slides are available for download in the Handouts tab on your control panel, so you can download that at any time. The webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to recording in the next day or two. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Scott Varho. Scott is the Senior Vice President of Product Development at 3 Pillar Global, and he will be your moderator today. Scott, over to you.
Thanks, Rafa, and good morning, everybody. Really excited about the topic today, connecting excellence in engineering to the product mindset. And before we jump into the topic, I want to get a sense from our audience in terms of how many of you are familiar with the product mindset. Rafa, do you think you could start our poll?
Sure thing. So the question:
are you familiar with the product mindset from 3 Pillar? Simple yes, no. I want to get a pulse.
I'm tallying up the results. Great, I think we have enough votes, so I'm gonna close this poll.
Great, the majority of you, that's fantastic. So I won't spend much time on the product mindset, but we're really excited to bring these concepts together. And before we jump into the topic, I want to introduce our panelists today. So as Rafa mentioned, I lead product development for 3 Pillar, and I'm joined today by our 3 senior most leaders in the product engineering practice for 3 Pillar. Welcome, gentlemen. We have Sayantham Day, Ovi Salagi, and Deepak Agarwal. Good morning.
Scott, just a little notice that we cannot see the slides.
Great. Let me fix that. All right. Excellent. All right. So as we jump into the topic, I wanted to just quickly review. So the product mindset breaks down into is focused on how we build for outcomes, for business outcomes in engineering and all of our crafts that we have here at 3 Pillar, through our principles of minimizing time to value, solving for need, and excelling at change. And before I ask the panel their first question, I wanted to do another quick poll of the audience. Which of these principles, minimizing time to value, solving for need, and excelling at change, is the most important for engineering? Rafa, could you launch our second poll?
Sure. Okay, I think we have enough results.
Great, quite a bit of balance there among the 3 principles. Excellent. So that gives us a sort of a grounding for where the audience is at, and that'll help guide us as we talk about this. So I'm actually going to switch back from the presentation to video here. All right. So then, starting with our first question for our panelists, you know, we talk a lot about the product mindset here at 3 Pillar. And Deepak, I wanted to start with you. A lot of people think that the product mindset is really focused on product and UX only, and doesn't really apply to engineering. And I wanted to get your view on that.
I would say product mindset is very, very closely related to how we build products, product engineering. And the reason people should not mix it with product management and so, because we don't use 2 words which actually confuse people: process and tools. Product mindset, I think, is all about how the engineers think, how we build products. And if I try to put it in layman words or a phrase, then without product mindset, the people, the engineers see a product, take decisions for the product, and build the product as excellent engineers. But when we add the element of product mindset to it, few things change. They build the product, they continue to build the product as excellent engineers, but they start seeing the product from end customer perspective, how they are going to see it. And the decision making is also changed. Rather than just thinking about the architectural decision, they are now more concerned about the value of the product, how soon the product can actually build something, can generate some value for the people who are investing their effort and money into it. So, and this plays a big role on how the product mindset is tightly closed with associated with product engineering. In fact, I would say it widens the aperture with by which the people look at the product. I remember when I used to do the programming many years ago, our first interaction and our first requirement as an engineer was, okay, where is the software requirement specification? That's when Agile wasn't there. And when the Agile was there, it was all about where is the user story? Does it have everything I need to do? But when the product mindset came into picture, I mean, I was blown away with the kind of things I was missing. I mean, now the engineers want the vision, want the roadmap. They want to first understand what is the outsized impact they are going to make by building this. And then they work in partnership with our clients to actually make it work. So that's the difference I see product mindset brings into picture.
Santham, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, as Deepak was talking about the difference the product mindset makes, I was thinking about my favorite example from the days I used to build products, and like I built a lot of different products in different domains, and most of them had some form of authentication or the other. And what amazes me is that every time I would start with some sort of a login screen, but the product was never about login. Going back, I feel like I wish I had started from the problem that we were trying to solve, so that I could give my customer more chances to solve the problem right. So I think that's the difference the product mindset would have made, and it is making to engineers today. That because they think from the product perspective, they think from the value it's supposed to generate. They give the clients, our clients, more chances at taking the shot at solving for the problem that they actually want to solve, and not login and not infrastructure and those things, which are important, but they're part of solving for need.
And you may solve those problems differently if you have a sort of like what's the big deal, like why are we doing this? You might solve them differently based on that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Ovi?
What I would add is, I think it's even deeper than that. We already seen multiple times in building products, thousands of products, the value of engineering practices when mixed with product mindset. And that is why also in the way we operate, we think, or we run internal initiatives, we try to apply them. And there shouldn't be a surprise, for example, when our talent folks are working on initiative, you will see them apply product mindset principle. So to answer the question, I think when you have that synergy between the product mindset and engineering excellence, the engineering practices, that's when we've seen successful digital products came out of that. And that is possible because you have commitment to quality, you have commitment to mastery, and you have respect for all the crafts, because they cannot work separately, they need to work together. And I think product mindset, it's a way to help engineers bring that language, which makes it easier to understand the business outcomes which they need to build through technical excellence.
So it's a unifying force then for cross-functional teams.
Yes.
Interesting. So okay, so that makes sense. If we push deeper though, and help our audience connect the dots between the principles, the minimizing time to value, excelling at change, and solving for need, how do those manifest in engineering? And Obi, why don't I start with you? We'll go the other way.
The first, let me just start with a quick story. At some point, one of the teams had the challenge of building a product in just a few months on a completely new tech stack, and it was really tough. It was a small team which had product folks, UX folks, developers, and testers. And the speed was really important, and also validating what they are building, because they just started from an idea. So if you think about the 3 principles, what I've seen happening is, for example, the minimized time to value. The team was able to leverage the collective knowledge, to leverage the practices which we shaped and adopted over the years. They were able to leverage the tools and boilerplates already built and proven in building other products. They were able to learn new stuff, and by doing that, produce value quickly, validate the assumptions, test their ideas, and so on really quickly. That was an example of minimized time to value, where the team has proven that. Now, going to excel at change, I think that's so important. Even if we think about today and what's happening now, we need to excel at change in the current context. So, but in order to do that, we know as humans we are resistant to change. So you need to build that in the organization, in the way you breathe, the way you operate, and so on. So at 3 Pillar, we believe that craftspeople are defined by and shaped by the technical product challenges which they overcome. So that's why we will encourage them to learn new stuff, to play with new technologies, to play with new frameworks, but also to try the experience of building different types of products. And that builds like a muscle for excelling at change. And that allowed also this team to learn a completely new stack, which they didn't knew before, and also to thrive in delivering value while doing that. And the third one, what we've seen is that usually technology folks, they enjoy playing with cool, shiny stuff. And also in this case, the client came and said, like, let's use latest and greatest, the most shiniest stuff available now in building this product. Now, we challenge ourselves and our clients in picking the tools and technologies which solve for need. And because we have the excel at change, we know that where there will be a need, we will be able to adapt. So this was also the example here. The team pushed for adopting the new technologies which made sense for the need, but step out from the ones which were just shiny in that context. So right. I think integrating all this together, it's really important.
Excellent. Santham, want to add anything?
Yeah, I think the couple of things that come to mind. So I really value that we also have an integrated UX practice. So when we talk about minimizing time to value, what UX enables us to do is to short circuit the route, the build measure route. And instead of building, you can just replace that with a prototype. That short circuit is really valuable because it lets the client test the theories out, it tests the assumptions out, and figure out what works, what doesn't work, and then that reduces the waste. And then when engineers build, there is much more confidence in the value that that build is going to bring.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the engineers are working, like we have our own agile methodology called the APLM, which is a derivative of, which has taken practices from Scrum and XP. Now these APLM practices are meant to drive the product mindset principles, and like it seems like a synergy. Like the product mindset came in, and then we started working with the UX group is integrated with us. They have a prototype. We have a high degree of high confidence in the value that the build is going to generate. We build according to the APLM, and then we get a release no later than 3 months, and then that generates revenue, and then it goes back to the principle of that products generate their own revenue and they can self-fund, and so it's a virtuous cycle, I would say.
And one of the things that strikes me about that is UX is so, if you think of the product mindset as a learning model, right, where we're digging for new information, and this is true of every product team I've been a part of, you always have new information, whether it's something proves to be harder to execute on than you thought. So when you do your ROI calculation, you need to take that into consideration. Or things are happening in production you didn't expect, or users are using your product differently than you, or they're finding things, it is a continuous learning journey. And so optimizing the team for that learning and application of new information makes a lot of sense. And as you point out, UX is an important part of that virtuous cycle. They can really short circuit some of that learning, which then gives engineers the confidence to know that what they're working on matters, which is great.
Yeah, and then they can also prioritize the engineering excellence part of it. Like they know that they should pay attention to the code coverage. They should pay attention to the continuous integration, because they're not going to roll this off and throw this away, and it's not a throwaway experiment that they're running. So the investments in excellence become more worth it.
Deepak, want to add?
Yeah, sure. When Santam was talking about UX, it reminded me of an example wherein we did a UX assessment of a retail website, and just by changing the location of the add to cart button, there was a significant change in sales. So it reminds me how important UX is to a successful product. In my opinion, the three principles which we have, at the start, of course, we start with solving for need, but over time they at times overlap. So it might be that in order to get something out quicker, we need to accelerate change. And for that, what I feel the engineers, actually it helps the engineer to break the rules. So far we know that, okay, if there is a right pattern, there is a right architecture, and we must abide with that because that is something proven, and we use that as a foundation stone to build over it. But when you adapt those values, your mindset changes and you want to solve that need first, and you get that confidence to break the rules. It reminds me of a interesting example, and it is more than engineering. It is about how the teams think to operate. So one of our client who's in due diligence of vendors, so most of the time people actually reach to the client, the product, and if they are planning to onboard someone, they would use that product to make a request, please do a verification of them. So this is how it works. Sometimes on a few occasions, the product received requests from vendors that we want to be pre-verified on what are the lags or gaps which we have. And then the company thought, okay, let's extend our product to take care of this reverse need. And they had planned a release in sometime in June or so. Because of this and COVID lockdown, there was a huge surge in vendors. More and more vendors wanted to get pre-verified, and the system wasn't ready. Because the release was planned in June, and this problem statement was being shared to the teams. I love the way team approached to it. There are 4 products, and the team analyzed that which of the product isn't stable and isn't getting much traction or changes in terms of the transactions because of the current situation. And once they identified which team is having least change, they decided on how about pausing that product and moving that team to this product which we want to build faster, because the requirement was to build it by April end. And as anybody would think, okay, it is like, okay, we have a sprint and now 2 teams are working on it. But the team didn't took this way. They felt that, okay, if we actually get into this project with the currently running team, there would be a expense, there would be a cost, because there is always that norming, forming, performing, and we are eventually going to slow down the work. So they actually broke the rule, and what they did, they were full package team with front end, back end, lead. So they said, okay, current team continues to work on the sprint, we will pick the next sprint, and we only need one person who could remove the blockers and dependencies so that we can continue. And with that, on Friday, they decided about this strategy. And on Monday, they started churning user stories. There were 2 stories which they completed. And eventually, out of all this, they were able to deliver even before the tight deadline. And that is how they focused on the need that we need to, because of the current situation, we need to get it faster, we need to accelerate change, we need to minimize time to value. And this is how they proposed the solution, worked on it, took the onus. And that's why I always keep saying that product mindset brings a completely different perspective, a different value from the teams which we have.
One of the things, in all 3 of your answers, one of the things that really strikes me is that the product mindset helps elevate the perspective from a focus on engineering to a focus on why the team, the whole thing, is assembled to produce this, whatever it is, for the business that team is working for. So it moves the locus of effort, energy, creativity to that higher order purpose. And I see you guys nodding. Would you agree? If you agree with that, then that kind of leads to my follow-on question, which is, so the product mindset starts with a build for outcomes perspective, and you just gave us a bunch of examples of how it does that from the team up. So kind of telling the other part of that story then is how, do you have some examples or ways in which excellent engineering drives business outcomes? And Deepak, let's start with you since you were talking.
Sure. I could. There is one story which is very interesting. It always comes to my mind when we talk about the product mindset and how the excellent engineering helps achieving values. So we are working for on a product, and that product is a legacy product, a big product, and that product had a lot of the background system was all manual. So we were working on the automation aspects of it to make it the administrator and the employees to work better on it. And the model of the product is to aggregate the pharmacists and the patients, so they can just move on to this, put some questions and get some prescriptions connected to the pharmacist. So we received a request. There was in the legacy system, there was a big module consultancy. And in that consultancy module, there were a lot of questions and algorithms, and people would respond on that and they would get connected. But because we were building all new algorithms and all, so we received a request that, hey, how about spinning up all together new team, and let's take a couple of months and build the consultant, that legacy module, as per the new system. And that, of course, for any team, this is to begin a new product and have all those UI, UX, and building the architecture is quite fascinating. However, when this request came to the team, I was blown away with the response they had. They mentioned, hey, this would take 8 months or 6 months for you to actually have that consultancy module functional. And we really don't want, of course, you would not want patients to wait for that. How about we make a change? We are building the new system. Let us extract some APIs, and we would go to the legacy system and tweak it to use these APIs, which means we would leverage 70% of the legacy system, and we would make this consultancy feature functional in just few weeks compared to few months of building something from scratch. And they did it, and the minimized time to value, solving for need, it comes into play. And with this solution, which is all about engineering, how the crafting things, okay, let's not do the big chunk of product building, rather try to find what we can tweak within the engineering aspect such that it is robust and we make it functional. So with this, the feature is live. It was done in just few weeks, vis-a-vis what earlier the plan was to make it in a couple of months. So I would correlate excellent engineering and product mindset this way.
Santham, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I think the product mindset mentions 3 ingredients of building a successful digital business, right? So the product must be chosen, the product must pay for itself, and the product is never done. And engineering excellence, you can I visualize it as something that it plays a role in each of those 3 things. And the example that comes to my mind is there was this time when there was a team that was struggling to release software, right? So they would build the software. Sorry, they would build the software and they would get to the last mile, and the last mile was the longest for them. Like it would take forever for them to deploy. The entire team would be up like 3 nights in a row because there would be deployment issues, and
We all
things
remember
had to be rolled back. Yeah, things had to be rolled back. And that really led to an erosion of confidence that our clients' customers had on them, right? So because if you can't deploy on a certain date and there are dependencies and people have given out their word to their customers and things like that, so that was really damaging to the business. The key here was the ability to not just, I mean, there were two things that were key, like ability to deploy sooner, decreasing the lead time, and that would affect the number of deployments or the deployment frequency, increase in deployment frequency, and also reducing the number of errors that would happen from that increased deployment. So there were these 3-4 variables that they had to take care of. And this is a problem that you cannot solve by there are no easy solutions to this problem, right? So you can't throw away what you have and say, let's build something shiny and new and let's try to make this one better. So they had to actually work with the client to figure out and that's when, I mean, like they actually had to go back, and they figured out they didn't have a good release planning process. Like, it's like when you try to reduce the lead time, the time it takes for someone to think of a feature and for that to reach production, in order to minimize that time, you need to have a process around that. So they didn't have a good process around release planning, which is one of the most important activities that we do at AAA. Like I mean, Deepak was mentioning about the rules that can be broken. I guess this is one of those rules that are never broken, and it raises alarms every time like that rule is broken. And we have seen teams suffer when the rule has been this rule has been neglected or broken. So yeah, so it began from there, but then ultimately it had effect on everything, like from the release planning, because the release planning, the process changed and people were more disciplined about it. So that changed the way the sprint planning was done, and that changed the way how much time was being spent on estimation, right? So instead of thinking about the relation of that story or whatever the feature that they were trying to estimate with the outcome that they were trying to generate, so they lost touch with the outcome, which meant that they were struggling to prioritize the stories, right? So once they connected back with the outcomes that they wanted to solve, the outcomes that they want to achieve, and the need that they want to solve, they were able to prioritize the stories. And then when they were able to prioritize the stories, they were able to estimate without going into the depths. Like they understood that the need here is to get the relative size of these stories. So we don't need to understand every story to the depth in order to estimate it. So that changed the way they estimated the stories. And that changed the way they were delivering their code. They started paying attention to the CI pipeline. They had Sonar, which was supposed to measure their code quality, but they had forgotten about it. They were not paying attention to it. So they started paying attention to it. So because the less technical debt you have, the lesser chances of failure at the point of deployment you have. So all these things, little things come together, and it took them about a little less than 2 years to bring things back to a point where they could release every 3 weeks. I think now they release every 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So at least they have the ability to release. Whether they do that or not, it's a different thing, but they have the ability to release. So from 6 months to 3 weeks, and that's a really good
So what you just
progress.
described then is like discipline in engineering allows their business to be more nimble and to be more responsive to the needs of the business and the client base.
Yeah,
Ergo,
exactly, right. So I mean, you wait for 6 months.
Yep.
Yeah, if you think of a feature and that goes to production in 6 months, probably you've already lost the opportunity, right? And you have a maybe chance of going into 6 months because the deployments are failing as well. But now if you can respond within 3 weeks, and you add things like feature flagging, so you can turn that feature off in the next release if it's not working for you.
Yep.
Right? So you have a much more nimble business.
And I think about it like just as a consumer of services of other companies, right? Like if it takes you 6 months to respond to my problem or the thing that I'm asking you to help me solve an extent, right? Like that's not a reliable vendor or service provider or whatever, you know, regardless of what service. If my bank took that long, for example, to fix their app, we would not be friends.
and if you look at the current scenario, so when this COVID situation happened, Zoom was suddenly started trending up. But we saw how quickly Google responded with equivalent features, and they're more stable, and they're more secure, and they're better engineered. And suddenly it's like, okay, why do we need Zoom? Like we can stick with Google, or we can go with Google. So better engineering, it was better engineering, right? That just helped them respond faster.
I just read yesterday that Google Meet is adding 3 million new users per day right now.
Wow.
And they specifically credit their ability to add new features like Zoom's grid view to Google Meet as their speed. Their ability to react to the changes as the reason they're able to capture so much market share right now. Not just the usage is increasing, but the adoption rate.
Right. And I bet they didn't roll out the changes to 2 million, like whatever million customers they have at once. They rolled it out to a target segment, saw how many errors they were getting, and did the A/B testing, and then rolled it out. So
I imagine so, yes. And we know that Google has decent engineers. I mean, they're okay. Not as good as ours, of course.
Right.
Ovi, would you add to that, or?
If you allow me, I will just give a quick analogy and then answer to the question. I think one of the challenges which all of us face in this period is getting a haircut, right? It's really tough in these times. So 2 weeks ago, my wife said, like, you should get a haircut, and I can give you a haircut. When I was 10 years old, I was cutting the hair of my dolls, and also my parents allowed me to cut their hair. And I said, okay, let's give it a try and see how it goes. Now, when I first looked in the mirror, like I was shocked, like, what have you done? It's not possible. Then I washed my hair and arranged it and so on. So it looked good, and so I solved my need. My wife excelled at change by doing something which is not her usual craft, and I also got minimized time to value, so I didn't wait it another 1 month, 2 months just to get a haircut. So in a way, you could say that the byproduct of applying this, it's a good one. But when that is not backed by craftsmanship, when it's not backed by excellent engineering, you don't have a successful product. To give a counter example, like 2 months ago, I tried a barbershop, and the experience there was amazing. Like I learned stuff about myself, about my hair, and how to take care about it. Of course, the product looked good even after the haircut, even after I washed it, and even after 1 month of getting that haircut. because it was designed and done for long term, not just for that situation. So I think people tend, most of the people tend to think that if you do lean startup, if you do agile, you should lose the quality and you should pay more for quality. I don't think that's true. If you combine the excellent engineering and the product mindset, and you have craftspeople which are intentional and are committed to quality, I think you can get both. And one example I have, it's a team had to build a product where the client already had a competitor, and they wanted to launch a product to compete with that. And in order to succeed, they had to move really, really fast. So they tackled initially 2 states from US where to test the idea. So they released after just a few months, and the response was so good that they quickly moved to all the states in US. So in order to do that, the team was so religious about continuous delivery, TDD, clean code, automation, testing, that when the ask came, they were able to adapt, and they were able to build for the long term, and they were able to build that successful digital product. So,
you know, within all 3 of your stories is something that was such an aha moment for me. You know, Agile or Scrum in particular did us all a disservice by calling capacity velocity. Because when you think about it, like the number of people that we have, the complexity of the work, and the number of days drives what our sprint velocity is. But it's not really velocity. It's not really velocity is a synonym for speed. But in a digital economy, speed is time from deciding to do something to putting it in clients' hands. It's what we call cycle time, which a lot of companies don't focus on cycle time. They focus on velocity. And you think about what a difference that is in terms of how you understand speed. And so, you know, one of the things that's kind of a running theme in the examples that you all gave is that cycle time is the real speed you're after. And it seems, and it totally makes sense that from a business perspective, speed is the competitive edge in a digital economy, right? Again, going back to each of your stories, right? Like being able to take new information and get them into customer hands quickly with predictability, with quality. That's really what we're talking about. That makes a lot of sense. The other thing that strikes me is I was just rereading Marty Kagan's Inspired, not to plug him or his book, but he said something really interesting that reminded me what a team sport great products are, which is he was saying that the best products are at the intersection of what's possible and what's needed or desired, right? Either side. So what the client's hoping to accomplish, how the company is hoping to serve them, and what technology can provide. And it reminds me of stories where engineers have come to me and said, you know, usually with great trepidation and hesitation, hey, I think we're doing it wrong. I think we can do it better. I've got some ideas, and they're, you know, some of the best ideas that I ever heard are, you know, I mean, not to get into the technology stuff, but it's like the flathead screwdriver. I always come back to this example. Like the flathead screwdriver gets used for so many things that it wasn't originally intended for. But some of those innovations are some of the best innovations that are out there, where you take simple tools, legacy or new, doesn't matter how old they are, but you apply them in a unique way, and that unlocks immense value. And that's just such a reminder that the engineers need to be in the game with you, right? They need to be thinking about, again, going to our earlier point, product mindset elevates the focus, not from just engineering for engineering's sake, but what is it that I'm here to solve? What problem am I trying to solve? It's not an execution problem as much as it is a business problem. And so that shift in context is really helpful, but it means then you're inviting the engineers to define the requirements. Right, to say this is the direction. If that's what you want to accomplish, here's the best of what technology can enable. That's pretty cool.
And I think it also provide. Go on.
No, go on, Obi.
I think it also provides a language for engineers to speak about technical challenges or quality attributes which are important in building a successful digital product. And by having that language, they can make easier the case, for example, why we should invest in reducing the technical debt, why we should invest in improving the performance, why is that important for the user, for the product, and for the success of it. Why we should invest in security, like the Zoom example, like why is that critical?
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say that when Scott, you were talking about the velocity and the cycle time, I was thinking that velocity can be so different from team to team, from the problem you're trying to solve, from another problem that you're trying to solve. But release cycle time, there's no relative thing. It's like you cannot fudge it, you cannot make excuses for it. It is there where it is. It is what it is, right? So I think velocity, you can be a good predictor for that. That if you're not predictable, then then you can't rely on your plans. But yeah, I think cycle time is definitely the thing that everyone needs to focus on.
There was a point of
measure speed.
Yeah, there was a point in my career where I rejected cycle time as a major KPI. I now, in hindsight, see that as a mistake. But it took the product mindset for me to really realize how important cycle time was as an indicator of organizational success to driving the business. Excellent. Well, I did want to encourage everyone. Hopefully, so earlier Rafa invited everyone to submit questions through the webinar. I have one that came in here that I wanted to ask our panel, which is there's a question here around technical debt. Technical debt is considered by many to be a reflection of engineering failure. What is your perspective? You mentioned technical debt already once. What is your perspective on technical debt? I don't know who wants to take this first.
I can go first. I think in today's world, we have a complexity and dynamic world which impacts the way we build products. And trying to think about technical debt as something to blame or blame the engineers or something to fight against, I think is the wrong approach. Rather than do that, I would rather push for building practices, methods to cope with it, to integrate it in the way you build products, and to know when to you can live with it and when you can ignore it and when you need to tackle it. So developing those practices, I think is the key, and seeing it as the way we build products.
I could speak a lot about it. I'm sure
your thoughts on this topic.
My thoughts, exactly. No, I think that for what I've seen is that the best teams, they actually intentionally accrue technical debt because they think that of technical debt in terms of a give-get ratio, that in order to give this value, what do I need to not do, and what is let me take a step back. So if you leave an engineer to their means, they're going to sit on a problem for days on end and polish it and never release it because they want pretty things and pretty code, and that's what they love doing. So when actually an engineer says, okay, I'm going to pull back on these on coverage, and I'm going to pull back on applying the perfect design pattern right now, and I'm going to release, they're actually doing something that is not natural to them. So it's a good sign that they're doing that because they're putting the release in front. They're not letting perfection be the enemy of good. And at the same time, they know what they have done. Like the best engineers that I've seen, and this is probably a little bit of a brag, but most of our engineers come into a stand-up and you will hear them say that, yes, it's done, but these are the things that I've left out. And once, if I have some free cycles in this sprint, I'm going to go back to it and fix it. those I mean, that's something that I hear often, that like they have a list of things that's in their mind, that, oh, I have not done this and I can't do that better, and that they know that, but but the work is done, like, because they obviously do not want to impact the release, and they know that it's good enough, but they know what it takes to make it perfect. So I think it's healthy, and it comes from a product mindset, because you know what need you're trying to solve, you're trying to minimize for the value. um, yeah, I think I would keep it at that.
But you said something really important there, which I think is probably the difference between healthy technical debt and unhealthy, which is the intentionality aspect of it. Deepak, did you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I exactly had this thing in my mind, that there are two kind of debts. One, when you are missing out on standards, leaving code quality issues and all, and that actually happens when you don't have those checkpoints, which actually in very early stages, when you are checking in your code, they actually let you know the quality gates are not there, and then you are just piling up a lot of technical debts, and that's a bad technical debt. Whereas a good technical debt is well thought of decisions, that in order to achieve this particular value, make it early to market, it is good to have a trade-off. And that trade-off is like a good technical debt. The best part is you are aware of it. And with product mindset, it also gives you an ability to prioritize. So if you have a list of those kind of decisions, when is this, so if you want to launch a particular screen, you know that the load is going to be less, and you want to get it to the market as soon as possible. Probably you would have a technical debt related to scalability of it. And when you get to know, okay, now the traction is there, the transaction, the load is increasing, you want to pull that technical debt and solve that, so that your product is ready to adapt to the new change in the business that is happening. So I definitely agree with what Santha mentioned, that it is good to have a known technical debt, which is driven by your product mindset.
I think of it the way I think about like a credit card in a small business, right? That you're and it's helpful that it's called debt. So it's a liquidity financial instrument, right? Like you want to keep things moving. You can do some light financing, but if you don't pay attention to it, if you don't pay down that debt, it can overwhelm you and really gum up the works. It's an apt metaphor, I think, for technical debt, that you have to pay the interest and start to pay down some of that principal over time, lest it overwhelm your ability to service that debt, right? Yeah, that's a rich topic. But we have another question that came in. Once product and engineering teams, quote unquote, get the product mindset, that seems logical. But what are the hurdles you've seen, particularly among product management leaders and executives, and how are those best overcome? That's a great question.
To me, the challenges which I've seen is in understanding the value of working on technical stuff, and what's the value of doing that compared, for example, or combined with new features, new stuff, and so on. So that's a big challenge. I've seen examples where the teams were dying to improve the performance. They were dying to reduce the costs on the infrastructure. They were dying to reduce the technical debt on some complex stuff. And the product folks and the leadership, they were like, no, we need new features, and that's most important. So when you have this language, you have the tools necessary for the team to make a strong case. So when you put everything together, it's prioritized accordingly. It has the important thing attached to it. So when product and leadership does the decision, they can make the decision also on the technical part. And why is that valuable for the business? So I think those are where the challenges come, and that takes time to build that language and the way of talking and discipline for the team. And we have practices in developing in this direction. We call them technical huddles, where we have engineering health index, which are assessment tools on different quality attributes, which we use in order to translate that technical language to product and business outcomes, to make the connection so that it's easier to prioritize better.
But one thing I want to acknowledge there too is like, and having acutely lived this is, you know, how much is enough is a really hard question for engineering leaders or even for business leaders to be able to articulate, right? So like, what should the response time of the page be, right? Should it be sub-second? That seems like a nice little threshold. Is that the right one? How do we think about that? How do we set that threshold? How much should we spend on security? How buttoned up, you know, you've spent way too much until a breach happens and then you didn't spend enough, right? Like that's, like neither of those are very helpful in terms of knowing how to spend on security. And so it's a real challenge, I think, in our industry, not one that we've necessarily cracked, but I think that, you know, one of the things that you pointed out, Obi, is like the language that provides a more integrated picture that takes into account the non-functional elements and starts to articulate them in business terms. I know you care about security because, you know, in a B2B SaaS, I've been in B2B SaaS roles where I get security questionnaires. And it's like, look, we can't sell if we can't talk about our security practices. Ergo, when it comes time to prioritize, know why I'm advocating for investing in security because it connects to business outcomes, not because I believe security is, you know, neat and I just want to be more secure, but that is actually connected back to the business. So I think that connective tissue, the linguistic connection is so important in order to pull off to get the business over that hurdle of like, I'm not going to preach to you about continuous integration. I'm going to talk about cycle time. I'm going to talk about time to market for new things. So again, like doing that translation layer is so important, I think, to having healthy conversation. But it means engineering learning how to speak the language of the business.
But it's also the benefit for the team. When they learn that, they will not even propose some stuff because that is not important now. For example, let's say you have an area which you die to refactor and so on. But when you look how much is used and how the roadmap impacts that region and so on, you might decide that now is not the time. And but because you can speak that language and you have that translator, the team is able to make that decision and not even propose that change.
I think we are all talking about a certain level of context, and that's what is the hurdle. Like even, I mean, product mindset gives you a way to approach things and gives you a way to think about things, but the context is really important. Like as Obi was saying, that once you have the context that this piece that you're dying to polish and refactor, it's not changing much. So things that don't change, you don't need to refactor them because you're just going to introduce bugs in that area, which probably was didn't have any known bugs, at least at that till that point in time. So context is something that we need to keep going back and figure out, do we have enough? Have we shared enough? Do the teams understand enough about the business domain? Like Scott was telling me about an experience that he had where the developers were building a copyright software, but they didn't understand the nuances of copyright. Like they didn't know what a copyright was. Like so, I mean it's like the other book that we were reading about upstream, like solving for upstream problems. It's like you'll never come to know what problems you solved by sharing that context with the developers. But it seems logical that you would want to share that context with the developers, right? Like this is what the copyright world looks like. This is what we're trying to solve for. So coming back to the context question is the biggest hurdle, and making sure you're sharing enough of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, context sharing is an invitation to join the conversation, right? Which is the really rich part of what we do, is we're trying to power digital businesses through digital products. And once you understand that, and the product mindset helps us connect those two concepts, then you realize this is not a factory model. This isn't about knocking down tickets. This is about solving that bigger need with the full breadth of all the crafts that we can bring to the table. And it's a team sport, working with the business, gaining insight into clients and market trends and competitive positioning and so forth. And then engineering and other crafts basically bringing their unique perspectives on what they can offer to that challenge or opportunity. Yeah, it's a lot richer. And it reminds me too that like the word product is such a misnomer because we think of products as the thing that gets shipped in the box, right? And digital products are not that. So they fundamentally change the dynamic of the client and business relationship and make it much more dynamic. And so obviously our craft has to be equally dynamic. Yeah, it's really interesting. Deepak, did you want to add anything to that?
Actually, you guys have covered it pretty much what I had. The hurdles are, I have seen the most common hurdles are on both the ends, where because of the past experience, okay, product mindset, but we know the way to work is we would give you the stories and you begin with that. That's what our past experience is. And at that point, we find it, that though our team is ready, they are eager to understand the business domain and get into those and provide those insights. But initially it is hard for anyone to, okay, product mindset maybe, but I don't it's probably the lack of trust and confidence. Really, can engineers be able to help me in the domain and that? But slowly and gradually, when they start interacting and they see the value of product mindset, that is where the hurdle at that end gets solved. Similarly, at the developer end, the hurdle is, okay, I want to do this like Ovi mentioned, but how do I convert it into the language which makes sense to the business? So for example, I remember one of the engineer wanted to introduce front-end testing automation. However, the message they made was not that I want to introduce a new framework. The message was that if I do this, I can confirm, I can bet that we are going to reduce the release time, that all the regression cycle by 3 days. And that definitely makes a lot of business sense to it. Oh, definitely try it. So the hurdles are at either end, but I think with product mindset and the confidence, both can be solved.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I just want to add one thing, that the product mindset doesn't expect you to have faith in anything, right? So it's actually the context and all these things are hurdles, and we're talking about them because we are trying to find a hurdle. Really speaking, because it's there are principles and we believe in measurement. So it's not a matter of faith. Like, so that is it's not going to be a problem for executives to try and guess, okay, is this going to bring me value or is this not going to bring me value? Like release, like all the things that we spoke about, like release time and reducing the regression time. These are like absolute things you can measure, and like they are not relative to anything.
Yep. Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, thank you. Really appreciate this. I know I have learned a lot from you already, so it's exciting to bring some of your insights to the public here. Rafa, do you want to help us with closing?
Yeah, well, thank you all so much. This was a great presentation, very informative, and a lot of fun. Thanks to our attendees who joined us this morning. I just wanted to let you all know that we are providing the ebook or the audiobook of the Product Mindset, Succeed in the Digital Economy by Changing the Way Your Organization Thinks. If you'd like to download it anytime, please feel free to go to productmindset.com/ebook panel or productmindset.com/audio panel. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to our presenters. We had so much fun.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.